2023, a great show lined up for you, including on the other side, we will be having an exclusive interview with the woman representative for Kirinyaga County, Jerry Minor, who tells us about how she dealt with the loss of her dad just 2 months to the general election. You definitely don't want to miss that interview. Good morning and welcome to Morning Cafe. I'm Flora Limuki.
All right, and speaking of which, at the backdrop of that, we'll be having an expert on matters, psychology to tell us how do you really deal with matters of grief. Stick around for that conversation from around 8:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. I'm yours truly, Stanley Nyeringita. Good morning.
To the top story now, learners and schools countrywide are staring at sweeping changes to the school program following far-reaching recommendations made by the Presidential Working Party on education reforms. Now, the changes recommended include the scrapping of the categorization of secondary schools and the removal of compulsory subjects for career choices. The Working Party has recommended that the traditional categorization of secondary schools into national, extra-county, county and sub-county schools be phased out with the 844 system. Instead, under the CBC system, the schools will be categorized in line with the career paths of learners. Under the changes aligned with the transition to CBC at the high school level, the party recommends that learners have options in subjects that will determine their careers. The party has also asked the KICD to rationalize the number of learning areas at junior high. Currently, students are expected to study a total of 14 subjects. And from our top story this morning, we ask, do you agree with the recommended reforms in the education sector? Do you agree with the recommended reforms in the education sector? You can tweet us or X your response, TV47 News, that's a handle there. You can also text us on the short code 22047 or on Facebook, TV47 Kenya is a page. Let's now get today's diary with Lemuki.
Oh, quite a busy day we have here, including the big story of the day, reforms in education sector, pre-primary, primary and junior schools, that is PP1, grade 1 to PP1 to grade 9, to be managed as one. And an interesting story on the World Coin. Thousands of Kenyans gathered at KSCC hoping to benefit from the nearly 8,000 shillings offered by cryptocurrency firm World Coin from iScanning. And President William Ruto calls on CSS to be conversant with their dockets as they signed their performance contracts. And the search for the next DPP, interviews for the next Director of Public Prosecutions begin as the search for replacement for Nordin Haji enters day 2. It is also the World Breastfeeding Week, with this year's theme focusing on providing a strategic opportunity to advocate for essential maternity rights that support breastfeeding, maternity leave for a minimum of 18 weeks, ideally more than 6 months. And the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties to release a post-election report for the 2022 general election. Away from that, the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture and Livestock Development, Mithika Linturi, will be before the National Assembly today, of course, to answer questions on accountability of his docket, and also Florence Bore of the Labour and Social Protection to be before the National Assembly later today to answer questions including on the welfare of Kenyans working in Saudi Arabia and efforts geared towards regulated licensing of recruiting agencies. And Soipan Tui of Environment will also be in the Senate this morning to answer questions on reasons for the failure by the Chief Conservator of Forest to approve the use of the land in Jukini Forest for right of away of the Ngariama and Jukini water projects in Kirinyaga County. Of course, This comes after some of these CSs missed the call by the Senate last week. And of course, we definitely hope to see them today at the times they have been called for, bearing in mind the conversation they had with the president yesterday concerning their performance in different ministries. That is what we have in the diary this morning. We keep updating you as stories come in.
All right, time for the news review now. A look at the headlines this morning and kick off with the Daily Nation. How school will change. It's a bigger story. It's our top story today. The far-reaching education reforms. Team proposes to ease the burden on learners. We're looking at the Daily Nation this morning. How school will change. And it has the reduction of subjects from pre-primary to grade 12. Abolishment of the national extra county, county and sub-county categories. Mandatory community service for senior and tertiary graduates, an interesting one there. Dress code rules for all education levels, that's as far as the students are concerned. For the parents, bursaries and scholarships under one legal framework, reduced curriculum overload cost, a unique identifier for every child, 3 slots in schools management boards. For the teachers, retraining, mandatory 1-year internship for education graduates, TSC Consulting Ministry on deployments and promotions, the lowering of entry grades for pre-service teaching programs, and for the state, raising the capitation for students, quality assurance functions, review of competency-based assessment framework, and exclusive role in running of schools for the Ministry of Education. That's a big headline this morning to do with education reforms, of course. We cannot miss mention of that Riot Act. Globe-trotting and unpunctual CSs upset Ruto. It's on the top strip of the Daily Nation this morning. And I'm sure it is one of the biggest, the big talking points today as well. That Riot Act read out by the president on cabinet secretaries who were late to that performance contract signing ceremony at State House, Nairobi yesterday. Another story featuring on the front page of the Daily Nation today, Maandamano, father to bury 2 sons, killed by police in Kisumu. At the bottom of the front page of the Daily Nation today, KRA updates systems to net new hefty taxes. After the Court of Appeal lifted the ban on the Finance Act, Kenya Revenue Authority has reviewed iTax, the online tax system, to reflect the 2 new pay-as-you-earn payee rates of 32.5% for those earning above 500,000 shillings and 35% for those salaried pocketing more than 800,000 shillings. Where do you fall? Well, that's the front page of the Daily Nation today.
Right. Let me take a look at the Standard this morning. Reads Ruto rides Riot Act, now the top strip of it. An angry and tough-talking president locks out cabinet ministers, PSs and top state officials for turning up late to his meeting at State House. Warns clueless members of his administration that they will soon be on the chopping board if they do not deliver services to Kenyans. You can dig into that on page 6 of the Standard this morning. In matters, okay, let me even take a look at a quote that President William Ruto said yesterday. We have a job because we have a contract. If you cannot keep time with your employer, you have basically dismissed yourself. It is just as simple as that. I should deal with cases of negligence, misappropriation, embezzlement, theft, and other misconduct or corruption in relation to public resources summarily and decisively. And this, even as Fred puts it, this will form largest talking points this morning. And in matters education, President's new radical education reforms plan. They have a huge echoes of this piece on the Standard from page 2, 3, and 4. So head of state to personally lead implementation of key radical reforms expected to redefine the sector, which he says is critical in building the country's human capital resource. From that, on the right side of the Standard, DCI to probe Londiani crash funds scandal. It is on page 5. And on page 10, suicide fears as doomsday cult deadline lapses. Right, that is on page 10. I don't know if we have, can you look at the People Daily, Fred?
Oh, yes. Probably Lemuki can take a look at this one, the People Daily.
Okay. It just matters education everywhere this morning. On People Daily, on the People Daily, the top page of the People Daily headlines today: radical plans to reform schools. President receives report from the task force led by Professor Munavu, which outlines measures the ministry should take in a bid to improve learning and align it to career growth for children. And of course, the paper detailing what is to be changed, including from PP1 to grade 9, the schools to be managed as one, and also national schools, just matters education basically on top a page of the People Daily. And also an interesting one here concerning the world coin, thousands sell eyeballs for crypto. Young people queue outside KICC Nairobi yesterday to have their irises scanned in exchange for WorldCoin tokens worth 7,000 shillings, despite warning from the Data Protection Commissioner. They was dispersed by police over security fears. Of course, that is a story that we are also looking into this week. It's been going on for the last few days. And also still on the People Daily, Russia-NATO conflict plays out in West Africa cause. Burkina Faso, Mali hit out at ECOWAS over plan to use military to quell Nigeria coup from Russia. France row is writ large. That is a story developing from the just recent Russia-Africa summit that was held. Still on the People Daily, Ruto reads Riot Act to late CSs. That is what we have on the top page of the People Daily.
More or less the same top headline on the Star this morning. Task force scraps subjects in radical proposals for CBC. This is a Star. New system, 51.2% support retaining structure with review. It is the same as our top story today. The far-reaching education reforms. Curriculum should be reviewed to address overload and overlaps, and it also goes to list some of the changes as proposed by the Presidential Working Party. Still on the front page, Ruto fires a warning shot of a laxity, bars CSS and PSS from attending the signing of the performance contracts for showing up late. Another story featuring on the front page of the Star this morning: stop state from withdrawing our security. This is from Azimio. Stop state from withdrawing our security.
Right.
Also on the front page of the Star, the top strip: arrest warrant issued for suspect in fake tender case. And that's the front page of the Star this morning.
On the front page of the Taifa Leo decided to go point blank. Mawaziri mbumbumbu. Wow. Interesting. Taifa Leo says Ruto afichua maafisa wengi juu hata miradi iliyo chini ya wizara zao aonya vikali. 22. So this is mawaziri waliotia saini mkataba wa utendakazi katika ikulu ya Nairobi jana. Okay, you have it. And on the top strip of the Taifa Leo, it says Mung'aro sasa aonya wasaliti. Gavana fanyia baraza lake mabadiliko huku akiwaonya wenye hujuma. Katika ukurasa wa 5, and also Mackenzie adai haki yake kotini pamoja na wenzake 29 wazua kioja wakilia kukandamizwa, katika ukurasa wa 4.
Okay.
And also matters sports. We definitely have to also look at what is happening in the wonderful world of sports. Mbappe akataa kabisa mkataba PSG. Right. So even as others are late in signing the mkataba, Mbappe is out here refusing his mkataba.
Wow. And before we cross the borders, the Business Daily, we do have the front page of the Business Daily. Do you have it, Lemuki?
I do. On the Business Daily, we have State Eyes. The headline of the Business Daily: State Eyes billions stashed abroad in extradition rules. Just an excerpt from that story. Kenya has moved to relax extradition rules. in proposals aimed at making it easier to bring individuals wanted in other countries for crimes such as stashing ill-gotten wealth abroad to justice. Fugitives to forfeit entitlement to rule of specialty extradition crimes include forgery, fraud, and piracy. And also an interesting one here, world-based, it's August, guys.
Yeah, but
Watching world-based migration.
Did you go with the Fred? I had given you a hint last week to try out the.
I'm yet to because the bosses are yet to give me time off.
Should allow us to go do the show there.
For this one. Boss umesikia maneno wildebeest zitakwisha.
Still on the people business daily, yes. By the way, I see an interesting one which also forms one of our highlights this morning. It says this coups_1 important point that France has overstayed its colonies in sub-Saharan Africa. I believe that's an op-ed.
Yeah.
Okay. An interesting bit there.
Okay, let's now cross the borders and take a look at some of the dailies in neighboring countries. We start off with Tanzania, and we're looking at Mwananchi. And it's one word there that I'm sure Kenyans are getting used to now. Kizungumkuti. Watoto 11 kuzaa maziwa. And probably this is not how we understand kizungumkuti in Kenya. Shughuli za uokoaji bado changamoto, hali mbaya ya hewa, kina kirefu na mkondo wa maji vya kwamisha, huku wazazi, ndugu na jamaa wakiweka kambi Mwaloni. And I think Mwaloni is along the shores of the lake. Sad story there on the front page of Mwananchi in Tanzania. Another story featuring on the front page, baraza la koleza mjadala viongozi wa dini wanasiasa. I am not very sure, but I think it's something to do with politics and religion and the leadership thereof. Another story featuring on the front page of Mwananchi, dola yatajwa kushuka kwa sarafu za EAC. Positive story there about the dollar against EAC currencies. That's the shilling in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. And it would appear that the dollar is falling. I don't know how, if at all it is, then it would feature in the Kenyan dailies as well.
It should.
Probably we should check that out. Vibaka mbwa. Vibaka mbwa kali waua wajeruhi Dar. Okay. That one.
Still on some more Swahili tongue twisters on Habari Leo. Daktari Mpango atoa mwelekeo kilimo. That is on Habari Leo. Daktari Mpango atoa mwelekeo kilimo.
So I'm thinking Daktari Mpango, that's someone's name. That's someone.
Yeah.
Dr.
Yes.
Mpango.
Yeah.
Daktari Mpango atoa mpango wa kilimo.
Ataka kuharakishwa mchakato mfuko wa maendeleo ya kilimo. Mfuko wa maendeleo ya kilimo? Translation?
Pass.
I thought you were the Swahili guru within us. Aigiza benki ya TADB kuongeza kasi ya kukopesha wakulima. Katika ukurasa wa 4, below strip of it, wapinzani wakemea matusi kwenye mikutano. Anayehutumiwa kutukana viongozi mitandaoni anaswa, katika ukurasa wa 2. Should also see more of that, by the way, in Kenya. Okay. Toa matusi katika mikutano yote, anaswe.
It is something we can relate to here in Kenya.
Yeah. Yes.
And the English version of what's happening in Tanzania is on the Citizen. Limuki, you have that one?
The Citizen, spotlight on free-falling East African currencies. East African countries have witnessed a steady depreciation of local currencies, with economists attributing the decline to import dependency as they suggest a way out.
So then we get a clarity on the dollar issue. In the Swahili version,
yes.
We thought it was the other way around.
The Uganda shilling depreciated by 2.9% against the US dollar in 2022. Its value fell from 35.62 against the US dollar in 2021 to 36.64 in 2022. And plans to turn councils into investment hubs The citizen still. Africa crisis, Burkina Faso, Mali warn against military intervention in Niger. Of course, this is a very interesting developing story, because of late we've been seeing African leaders really come out strongly against the West. I don't know if it's a way to side with...
I think the version we have on the screen right now is the wrong one. That's for Friday, July 28th. Today's Citizen has a different headline. If my director could correct that, please.
Right. Even as we take a look at that, because the time is really flying, and the cartoons this morning are quite interesting, actually, for the Daily Nation. I think it is one of those that you look at it and you really have to smile if you're looking at it. Okay, depends on which side of the door you're in. Right here, a locked door, a furious. Oh, sorry, Daily Nation, page 17. You can take a look at that with us even as you watch us this morning. So furious, a caricature that looks like President William Ruto burning red hot with the smoke coming out. He's holding a paper saying, Riot Act. Before you even have it, if you can have that, Director, I have it. And the caricatures of two CSs looking like your guess is as good as mine. There you have it. Running to the door. There's a paper there.
Of course, you
written
can see
meaty.
one is written meaty. That we know which ministry
It's definitely
has these abbreviations.
And the cabinet secretaries and the civil servants in front of the furious one, they're smiling, by the way. I think they're smiling because they were there early enough.
Yes, they had to be there early enough.
All right, and on the Standard this morning, if you remember the whole story of the Trojan horse, I believe it's a Greek story. So there's a horse written Russia, has blood spots on it, and then there's the door and the wall, and behind it is Africa. So it has a whole international relations deeper meaning to it. Mm-hmm. Which one, Fred?
Oh, definitely the one on the Daily Nation this morning. It is, of course, and we mentioned this, it is one of the big talking points today, the fact that the president read the Riot Act against CSs, not just for coming late, but on their performance in general. Yeah. He said something very curious, that he had been having conversations with some of them, and he realized that some do not even understand their job description, that he knows more. He has more information about the ministries than the CSs themselves.
And it's against the constitution, according to him, because this CS should be advising him.
Mm-hmm. Yet he's the one who made the appointments in the first place.
Absolutely.
They're not performing. Then what does it say about his position as president?
And it goes back, even as chime into this, goes back to what, when he was appointing this, there was a whole back and forth and a whole debate, even from the opposition and other factions saying, these people that you have appointed, it's political appointees, and he was there defending them and saying, no, I want politicians here. They've chosen politicians because they understand the people. I don't want to have more technocrats so that they don't just be in the boardroom and all that.
Absolutely. It all boils down to the whole conversation of having technocrats and campaign rewardees for these positions. And of course, it's beginning to show, because it's been months and months. So even if we give them a grace period, by now I'm sure they should have an idea of what their dockets concern. And I see two CSs there running. Of course, one would try to say that he was running matter security in Lamu yesterday, but the other one, it seems...
there was no excuse. There was no excuse.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is our news review this morning. We'll be looking at the headlines with my panelists after the break. Remember, our top story today has to do with the education reforms. It's what's headlining on all the big dailies in Kenya today. How schools will change on the Daily Nation. President's new radical education reforms plan on the Standard. It's also headlining on the Star and the People Daily. It will form a huge chunk of our discussion this morning. And this morning we also asked, do you support the recommended reforms in the education sector? Do you support the recommended reforms in the education sector? At TV47 News on X, text us on 22047. You can also respond to the question on Facebook at TV47 Kenya is a page. Now, today we'll be having a very interesting panel. You do not want to miss this. The Honorable John Wanjiku MP Kiambaa will be in studio. Raphael Obonyo, public policy analyst, and Justina Omai, former presidential running mate in the 2022 elections. Do stand by for this panel. After the break, you're watching Morning Cafe. TV47 with me, Fred Indimuli, and I'm busy tweeting the question this morning. Do you support the recommended reforms in the education sector? Kindly give us your feedback on X at TV47 News. You can also text us at 22047. That's a short code. You can also give us your feedback on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. And I'm in studio with a very interesting panel this morning. The Honorable John Kawanjiko, MP Kiambaa constituency. Good morning, Mheshimiwa. Karibu sana. It's good to have you in studio.
Asante sana.
I don't know if you've been to this new TV47 studios.
I've been to TV47 radio.
The old one?
But no, the radio.
Oh, the radio.
Yeah, in the
Radio
Kale.
47.
The Radio 47.
Yes.
But I've not been into TV47.
I'm sure you're enjoying the space.
Definitely.
Next to the Honorable John Kawanjiko, we have Raphael Obonyo, public policy analyst. It's good to host you here, Raphael. I've hosted you in many other stations. It is good to have you here.
Great to be here and happy to reconnect with you. And you guys have an amazing studio, man.
Asante sana.
Yeah, this is great.
Last but definitely not least, it's our privilege to introduce Justina Omai, a former presidential running mate at the elections in 2022. And you were joking how you were welcoming me to TV47.
Yes. You have found me.
You've been a regular
Yes.
panelist here. It's good to have you in studio today.
Thank you, Fred.
And on X, we're still trying to get used to this. On X, your Twitter handles at Justina Omai, at Raphael Obonyo, at Kawanjiko _. Yes, you can also tag them in your responses. And that forms our biggest conversation this morning, coming from the dailies, how school will change. And President's new radical education reforms plan. And coming from a week that was full of politics, coming from the Maandamano headlines, it is a breath of fresh air to discuss issues to do with education. 2 days in a row. Yesterday, it was about the university's placement. Today, we're talking about the far-reaching reforms that the Presidential Working Party report handed to the President contains. Now, it is very interesting to note that these are two major reforms in the education sector. Of course, I'm sure we would be talking about Ruto reading the Riot Act to his CSs. We'll talk about that. We'll come to that. We cannot escape the politics. But in as far as education matters are concerned, and just looking at some of the highlights, a reduction in the subject's burden. This has been a big talking point, especially for parents. Currently, learners in CBC have to contend with up to 14 subjects. Subjects for pupils from pre-primary to senior school defined and ranges from 5 to 9 in the new reforms. The CBC school to comprise lower comprehensive school and upper senior school. They're getting rid of the word secondary from the naming of schools. End of national schools. Scrap national, county and sub-county schools and replace them with career pathways. This is very interesting. Revised capitation, of course, that has to do with funding from government. Merger of funding boards, varsity college funding. This one came with the new reforms for the universities to be based on 4 categories, namely vulnerable, extremely needy, needy, and less needy. Let's start with you, Justina. The question we're asking today is, do you support these reforms? They are far-reaching. And we've come from a period, about a year or so, well, not even a year, about 2-3 years, where there was a lot of confusion, especially with the curriculum change with CBC. Up to now, the pioneer class that are in junior secondary still, junior school, still do not know what exactly the curriculum should be, which books to use. Do you welcome this report?
I do welcome from a parent perspective. Many parents have been telling me the cost implication. You're always printing, you're always doing so much.
You are doing the homework yourself.
Yes,
you,
so to
you don't
speak.
want to
Yes, and you know, when you look at the angle, the argument was that many parents are not at home with the 844. Parents used to let their children continue learning, they're not involved. But the cost implication was very high. So I welcome it because at least it has reduced. However, having gone to a national school, maybe the only thing we used to pride ourselves with, I was in Chalks, I was in Limuru Girls. But the most important thing is now government to offer quality education across board. I shouldn't have to go to Limuru Girls to feel that that I'm getting quality education. Even the village school should have the same facilities as that national school. So I think this is a step in the right direction. Looking forward to the conversation that after we have educated our children, now churning them out. Where do they go? Yesterday there was a report that around 500,000 do not want to go to campus, or rather they're not choosing to go to campus. So why are they not choosing to go to campus? Because there's no employment opportunity. So I think going forward, this is a step in the right direction, but a lot has to be done going forward.
Yes. Honorable Kawanjiku, the issue is it is an opportune time to relook at our education sector, granted. Yet some of these reforms appear a bit radical. Yes, with the confusion that was there with the CBC coming from 844, we're still confused. Was CBC the right one? Was it introduced the right way? Do you think these reforms address those concerns?
Yeah, I think I want to appreciate that the effort that the president is putting in terms of education by investing and making sure that we have a clear path in terms of which system are we going to adopt as a government. And the moment I remember we were campaigning during 22 election, we were telling the president, we need to scrap this CBC thing, because majority of the parents were very uncomfortable with it. Because when you tell a student or a child from maybe probably an area in Elgeyo Marakwet to go and print, and there is no printout, he doesn't, even the parent doesn't understand, you know, how to even print. It becomes, you know, quite unfair to some of those students who are from the rural areas. But we appreciate the recommendation that has been brought up by the task force, because we can see there are quite a number of issues that we need to address, because this is just a recommendation. Then the conversation will start building up as far as Parliament is concerned and maybe the country is concerned. Which radical changes are we going to adopt? Probably because not everything that they recommended will be probably adopted in this system. But it is also a starting point for the president to start knowing which direction now to take. Some of these issues, we are the student of, you know, the 844 system, that we felt that it was very okay, because you also need to know how your child is performing.
Yes.
You know, even now when they are told that, you know, you cannot even write marks or say anything, I mean, you just won't.
We still have that hangover of ranking of schools, and bragging rights are just still
Absolutely. So I think we are still catching up, but I think as a country, we really need to have this conversation. It should not be left for the government alone and the leadership, even the private sector, so that we see which recommendations are we going to adapt going forward. Because there are also some very good, you know, recommendations in terms of also making sure, because I'm also confused as a member of parliament. Go to my constituency, I have a very big difference in terms of the junior secondary school. The teachers are asking, we don't have laboratory, we don't have kitchens, because now we need to separate between lower primary and junior primary and junior secondary. You know, there is a lot of confusion in the whole system. But at least with the recommendations that are coming up, it also seems like probably we're gonna go back again to the primary, you know, the way the primary schools, you know, were founded. Like, even if you're in junior secondary, but there is nothing like junior secondary still being primary school.
Yes.
But still now the teachers, because even the teachers who will be teaching this junior secondary, who will be teaching the primary, you know,
there's still a confusion.
There is still a whole confusion in the CBC.
And Raphael, it will need a radical culture change. Even for Kenyans to understand this. And the concern that has been there, even with the kind of challenges that have faced the CBC and the rollout of the new curriculum, was the fact that even the government itself and the education ministry was not communicating as well in as far as even the curriculum. What exactly do we need? I am a parent and I have a child in grade 7. And for the longest time, the school she's attending was not aware of which textbook to go for. So you wonder, for a whole term, the child has been going to school and they are not sure which textbooks they should be referring to. The issue of communication and communicating government policy, especially on issues of great importance as education, is key. Is this government really doing it? Yes, we can see the media is now, it's a lot of information on the front page of the dailies this morning. Do you think this is the kind of communication that is needed, or should they do more than what we are seeing in the media today?
Thanks, Fred. I think first is just to appreciate, that education is essential for progress for any country. For us to develop as a country, we really need to have the right education and invest in it, like my colleagues have said. And so if we don't get education right, we'll never get anything right. So that should be our starting point. And of course, there've been a lot of efforts to try and either modernize or reform our education to be relevant for the in the 21st century. And that's how we moved into CBC. And I think the introduction of CBC is what didn't happen right, in the sense that there were concerns that there was no enough consultations, not everyone was on board, and that there are certain things that were rushed, and so many people felt left behind, including providers of education themselves, like teachers and schools. So there was something wrong that happened there. And then there was also no agreement on what direction should we actually take as a country. Of course, there was agreement that we really needed to reform our education, but in terms of what direction, I think that wasn't there. And the current regime, I think one of the key, issues that they've picked up is these education reforms. And I think this is the second report. Remember the first report, the task force was chased with that report. They were told they are not, the proposals were not far-reaching. So the president asked them to go and do more research, more consultations, and ensure that it was fairly radical. And I think that is what we now have. In terms of communication, I think this has to be communicated, because education is something that involves almost everyone, diverse stakeholders. Mm-hmm. And if you do not communicate it right, then we might end up in the same problem where people are assuming, because we shouldn't leave space and room for people's interpretations. It should be very clear.
There should be no ambiguity.
No ambiguity. And so government needs to take lead. I remember even last time when the first report was quote unquote leaked, each newspaper was making its own interpretation, you know, with some saying, oh, they've reduced the subject, with another paper saying they've increased. So there shouldn't be room for that kind of, those kinds of interpretations. And so government must take lead in this and first ensure that everyone else is involved, but also ensure that the communication is done right.
Justina, when you come to the issue of universities, there's an introduction of course-specific fees. That if you're doing a degree in medicine and someone else is doing a degree in law, you should not be paying the same. Previously, we were paying the same school fees. Chiromo, main campus, University of Nairobi, JKUAT, same fees. Now, if such is not communicated clearly, because you've just mentioned the issue of the report yesterday, where about 500,000 people who are eligible to join universities were just not interested in applying for the same. Don't you think that such a huge and radical adjustment, especially in issues to do with money, could actually affect the issue even more?
Actually, it will, because it seems like now the wealthy kids and the poor kids are being discriminated by the government, and they all belong to the government of Kenya. Why do they come to arrest you when you try to commit suicide? Because they say your life belongs to the government. So I feel it's a bit discriminatory. According to our constitution, Article 43, education is basic, and the government should focus on that. However, it's incumbent on the universities now to start thinking outside the box in terms of looking for funding. What am I saying? If it's about research, if maybe us we're in JKUAT and agriculture is our way, what have they innovated? Are they partnering with the government? Is the government looking for investors, you know, for that creativity and innovation to make it larger scale to solve a problem in society? You know, they'll be getting royalties from there and everything that comes with the innovations and creativity. So I think from a university perspective, they also need to move in the 21st century. But from a parent perspective, I feel students are being discriminated. Some of us benefited from help, even if we went to a private university. So I feel, and then how are they going to know that this child is needy, not very needy? That is why, again, you see the culture of bursaries. Mheshimiwa will tell us that some of us feel that bursaries are not awarded to the rightful people. They're given to the cronies. So if I know how to sneak in the system, I can't afford to pay for my child, but I'll say my child is needy. And then they end up benefiting. So I feel something needs to be done if looking at trying to standardize and not to discriminate children, but also universities to look for their own funding in terms of creativity and innovation.
What about this new layer in decision making when I want to join university and I'm thinking, previously it was just, how did I perform in my secondary school exam?
Yes.
Now I have to think, do we have money for me to do this particular program, to pursue this particular degree program as opposed to the other? That even if I was successful to pursue medicine, but probably, because we still do not know how much it will cost. It costs more than political science, that I would end up going for political science because we can't afford that.
So actually it's going to lock out. The more costly courses will be done by people who can afford. What about someone who performed? it takes
It
us
defeats the
back.
whole issue of equity again.
Yeah, it takes us back to the argument. You hear some people saying, "Me sijasoma, but I'm wealthy." You know, people are known to say that. Then why is the government investing in education if you have role models in society saying, "I'm not educated, but I have money"? So it beats the purpose of even performing. It kills meritocracy, competition, ideas. So I think it's not a step in the right direction.
Honorable Kawanjiku, go back to the CBC issue. And there's a big discussion about the disparity between schools in urban areas and schools in rural areas, especially the CBC, and the kind of assignments they get, even the kind of texts and the approach. Do you feel that these reforms have addressed that one? Because the schools in Baringo and schools in Nairobi appear to be two different spheres.
Definitely. I think when you look at the system itself, it's not a fair system when you talk about the CBC, because some of those laws that they and the examinations that they put across, that this is what you're supposed to have, covered. Some of the schools from the rural areas, they stand disadvantaged because of the lack of the systems to help them, achieve some of the exams or some of the materials that they need to be having. But I may also differ kidogo with Justin on issues of university. When you look at the system that the president is introducing, it's actually fair. Because I don't understand the reason why me, as Kawanjiku, I have my daughter probably have gone to Brighton. Yeah, I'm a parent. I can be able to afford to pay any other university. But when they come maybe to Nairobi or to the public universities, they all go for help. But from class 1 to Form 4, I've been paying private, fees. So when we get kids from, very disadvantaged background, and they all go for help, you don't understand now who is supposed to be given, who is not supposed to be given. So we are creating a system whereby we go on need basis. We have to set a committee or a system whereby we need to understand that this person is coming from a poor background and need a full scholarship. It's not only help, it's only a few coins to help him continue with education, but a system whereby this student can be sponsored, fully sponsored by the government.
Yet so far, even help and bursaries have been pegged on the needy, on the need basis.
Yes.
That, and I remember we used to actually document the level of wealth that your family has, so that you qualify for a certain amount.
Yes.
Do you think that right now, because we've talked about extremely needy, and because that's 4 categories of funding for the vulnerable, extremely needy, and less needy. And it's good to put it on paper, but achieving this kind of division where you actually classify some people as less needy than others.
Yeah. I have participated in quite a number of bursaries, especially even from my CDF kitty. But you have seen also some of the organizations, they have been very, very thorough in terms of the kind of students they are giving their scholarship. And the system that they have introduced, it has actually gone back to where that student come from. Like they will introduce the chief, they'll bring the chief on board, they'll bring the community policing people on board, they'll bring the MC on board, they'll bring the MP on board to go and verify whether this student really need that scholarship. So I think we just need to be honest, especially, but at the end of the day, even when I'm issuing bursaries, there are people who are in my constituency not issue bursaries to. I'll have to create a system that this system is benefiting those people who need or deserve this kind of bursary. So there may be a small tall order in terms of making sure that this is implemented. But if we come up with a better system to make sure that those students who receive the government scholarship are from the needy family, probably will introduce or will fence around, making sure that the university don't collapse at any given time.
And that such a system is actually standardized across all the 47 counties, because that's the other issue.
Yes.
Now let's come back to the scrapping of national, county and sub-county schools, Raphael, and replacing them with career pathways. So school selection from primary school, you'll be selected into a school depending on what career you are pursuing. Do you think it's possible? Sometimes you meet someone in class 7 or class 8 and they have no idea what they would want to pursue. If at all they join a school that's focusing on the arts as opposed to sciences, and then they realize midway, I think I made a mistake. Don't you think that this is a very dicey, if I may call it that, dicey route to take?
Yeah, I think first, just building on what Justine had said, it takes away the bragging rights, which you know, people who said I went to Alliance.
Yeah.
So listen to what I'm saying, you know, won't have that anymore, you know. But other than that, I think the idea of introducing sort of a pathway from a very elementary level is extremely important. Because what happens is we wait until people get to, you know, even high school or past high school. And then we start asking them, what do you want to be? And then someone tells you, I want to be a doctor, when he's already at the university. And that is not ambition that was nurtured at a very elementary level. So I think this issue of pathway is extremely important. Also because if you look at our system now, we have colleges and universities just churning out graduates, but someone did something that you just get to learn about it at the university. He goes out and then he says, I don't even think I need to do this. So, but if you start nurturing it early enough, and I see parents now do that, you see kids starting to play soccer when they're really young. They're even saying that I want to be a professional footballer. Someone starts saying I want to be a professional musician. So why would they waste time doing other things when they know that if I take this path, it will lead me to where I want to go? So it is radical, it is ambitious, but if we invest in it, this is the future, and that is what
the issue of investment is key here.
Exactly.
Because it means even the CBC at the elementary level, the infrastructure needs to be able to train a learner to be able to make a decision on their career path early enough. It calls for a lot of public investment as well. Do you think that this government is ready and able to make that kind of investment? I remember the kind of allocations given to the education sector, free secondary, because they're very rudimentary, some of these discussions. We're talking about school feeding programs, but now the kind of investment needed now should be able to place the learner at a position where they can determine their career paths. This will call for a lot of investment. Is the government ready for this?
I don't think they're not ready. They're ready rather, because look at, yes, they're investing in the education itself, but what is this student learning out there? Fred, there's a neighbor of yours, a young boy who knows that you work here. So they'll want to know, where is Fred here? What did he study? But we no longer have those examples. Remember, this government is focusing on the hustler nation, watu wa chini. So they're not even focusing on the middle class, people who are educated or people who are doing well. Their focus is mama mboga and mtu wa bodaboda. So from a societal motivation perspective, someone is motivated to look at mama mboga and mtu wa bodaboda because they are killing the middle class, or where the companies can employ people with these skills. So I think one government also needs to focus on the fact that their role is not to create employment. They can never do that. It is not possible. Their role is to provide a conducive environment for other businesses to thrive, for investors to come with their own ideas, for more TVs like this, because you'll need lawyers, accountants, Kina Fred, many people, different career backgrounds. That is what the investment that we need. It's not just at the classroom money. It's not just the theory. We want to see it practically in society. Also, let me add that, Mheshimiwa, when I take my child to Braeburn, it means I'm planning for them to go to the UK, to the US, Oxford. So I'm not really even focusing on University of Nairobi. But again, this government telling us about bottom-up. They're killing again the middle class. In terms of now, you want us to say that we are extremely needy, yet we are not, but we want to benefit. Where are you throwing out this child whose parent can afford 2 semesters? Like also in Daystar, my parents paid for me 2 semesters, but the third one used to be paid by HELB. So they are forgetting to balance that even some people can afford part of the year, but not the full year. So then they are just focusing on, the bottom up. We need to focus on the bottom up, the middle, the top class, because all of them are citizens of this country. Okay. Finally, on whether the career paths, the choice, you can decide today. I wanted to be a DJ in class 7. And then when I came to campus.
What happened to that?
My parents refused. It's a deferred dream, right? Then when I was in campus, Kibaki says that procurement officers have to have studied procurement. You see, now, imagine the decisions come into play. So I don't know whether it's going to make sense. I think they should leave some leeway that whatever you get, you can decide up there.
Wow, far-reaching education reforms is the biggest talking point today. The intention is good, at least on paper. Are we being too ambitious? But today we ask, do you support the far-reaching recommendations in the education sector? And you can give us your feedback, and we'll try and sample some of your views as we continue with this broadcast. You're watching Morning Cafe. Let's take a break now. We'll be back discussing more, and especially the politics that I know you want to talk about. Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe on TV47 with me, Fred Indimuli. Our top story this morning, learners and schools countrywide are staring at sweeping changes to the school programs following far-reaching recommendations made by the Presidential Working Party on education reforms. The changes recommended include the scrapping of the categorization of secondary schools and the removal of compulsory subjects for career choices. The Working Party has recommended that the traditional categorization of secondary schools into national, extra-county, county and sub-county schools be phased out with the 844 system. Instead, under the CBC system, the schools will be categorized in line with the career pathways of learners. Now, under the changes aligned with the transition to CBC at the high school level, the party recommends that learners have options in subjects that will determine their careers. The party has also asked the KICD to rationalize the number of learning areas at junior high. Currently, the students are expected to study a total of 14 subjects. And so we ask this morning, do you support the recommended reforms in the education sector? You can share your feedback on X at TV47 News, on the short code 22047, and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya is the page. I'm still in studio with Justina Omai, former presidential running mate in the 2022 elections, Raphael Obonyo, public policy analyst, and Honorable John Kawanjiko, MP, Kiambaa constituency. We want to move the conversation forward and move away from the education matters and look at some politics. And yesterday, there was a big event at State House, Nairobi, where cabinet secretaries and principal secretaries were signing performance contracts. And what came out of there was this interesting quote by the president: "We have a job because we have a contract. If you cannot keep time with your employer, you have basically dismissed yourself. It is just as simple as that. I shall deal with cases of negligence, misappropriation, embezzlement, theft, and other misconduct of corruption in relation to public resources summarily and decisively." Yes, President William Ruto reading the Riot Act. This story has also featured on all the front pages of all the top dailies, on the Star, on the Daily Nation, on the People Daily as well. And therefore, we cannot ignore it. And it's interesting to see, 8 months after their appointment, Justina, that CSs are already misbehaving, even showing up late for, we even as a media, we were not so sure how to talk about the misbehavior of cabinet secretaries because they've been misbehaving. Some of them overreaching the authority and mandate, saying some our police officers will be fired, withdrawing security for some people, then saying that they will get the security back after they start behaving well. Yet we know that the police service is independent. And the president has reminded us of this time and again. So seeing the president come out and actually call out the cabinet secretaries for their indiscipline, I think we were just sitting back and smiling and saying, oh, finally.
It's been a long time coming.
It's been a long time coming.
Yes. Actually, Taifa Leo says, Mawaziri mbum. Yeah. I don't know what. So you can imagine. So what I make of it, the president, when he tells us this, the citizens were wondering, so no job has been done. Because he's saying, I even know more than you guys. So these people went there, they reached, in Kiswahili, walifika, them their role was to just get the perks of being in power, and they're forgetting their duty. Another thing that I think I should fault the president and the deputy, because they're the drivers of this conversation. After they won the election, it was issues of Thanksgiving, hiring out tents. Actually, the most lucrative business now to do with government is hiring out your tents because they're having events here and there. They're over-celebrating. Homecoming, thanking, they were given positions. At times, I wonder when they're thanking, when this person who was given this job, alikuwa na disability gani? You know, you wonder. So I think the president is good, he's calling them out, but it is showing us that as the appointing authority, he has failed to show directions. When he tells us this, we are like, we already saw. Kenyans complained, even the cabinet composition. But again, there was the argument, at ni serikali ya shareholders. So you end up giving those shareholders who are of your caliber and your quality and your competence to behave like this. But I think it's a good thing that he's spoken. And again, they have been saying that they were working with the Uhuru budget. So probably they were still doing the holiday. Now their budget is coming up. We need to see them perform. And I also want them to move away from blaming the previous regime. So my question is, when will their government come? If they keep on telling us, even yesterday the president said, during COVID, money was stolen. What are they doing about it now that they're being in power 11 months later?
Okay, definitely they cannot blame the kind of misbehavior on the last regime. This one, but it must be embarrassing even for the president to have to call out CSs directly, because they represent him directly.
Absolutely.
Anytime you see a CS, that's why they have flags on their cars, they are representing the president directly. So when the president, probably he had the option of actually calling them out, reading the Riot Act to them in private. For him to choose to do so, especially when they're signing the performance contract, it says something. Some people argue that it was just a distraction, that the president knows you're looking for a different headline. Let me give you this one.
I don't know how true that is, but I really want to commend the president for that. Because I mean, at the end of the day, you cannot be a cabinet secretary. I'm with the president on that one. You are coming to sign your performance contract with the people of Kenya, because that has been the culture throughout. And actually I was very shocked to realize that it has been going on for more than 20 years. But yesterday I think it seems like, the highlight of all the performance contracts signed by the cabinet secretaries. So you cannot be coming to sign your contract with your employer and your rate. I mean, it shows some irresponsibility in terms of the duties that have been allocated and the privileges that have been given by the president. And it's also good to make them aware that we have a contract with the people of Kenya. And he went further to tell them, if I know a certain project within your ministry and you have no clue, you have no idea, I mean, shame on you, because I mean, at the end of the day, you have been given a whole 1 year to study and to understand the whole ministry and what is happening. The government and the Kenya Kwanza plan that we have for the, for the people of Kenya. You are the implementer of this plan in your ministry. So at any given time, if you're not able to know whatever is happening, I mean, you are letting the government down. So it was actually a warning. The next maybe we hear any cabinet meeting or something happening, probably some will be dropped and others will be picked, because I mean the government...
an indication that there's a looming reshuffle in the cabinet.
It is coming actually, because at the end of the day, if you're not performing and you have been having that complaint kidogo, even behind the scenes, the president has been very adamant in terms of making sure that we implement the plan that we have. As far as we are dealing with the politics and the Azimio characters, we must also, he also told us, we have also a responsibility and a history to make by making sure we do the right thing. And that's why he's telling them, wake up and smell the coffee. Because if you don't, the next maybe reshuffle you hear, some will be dropped. And that's what maybe probably what happened with the previous regime. But I want to disagree with Justine on a few issues in terms of, going back and giving thanks to the people. And even me as a member of parliament, even to date, I go back again and tell the people, you know what, I'm so grateful that you gave me an opportunity, to become your member of parliament. As I continue working hard to make sure that I deliver on the promises, you also go again, because it's politics. You cannot be learning politics like it's an organization, or probably because now you have been elected as a CEO, you no longer, appreciate the board that elected you to become a CEO of TV47.
Okay.
So you go back again to them, keep reminding them, we appreciate it. And that's how we were able to maneuver from the Azimio character, and we won the government when they had the system and the deep state.
I got appointed to T47 just the other day.
You should know coming.
You should be grateful and actually tell them, how happy you, because so many people had that opportunity to go and campaign, but not everybody made it. So I think in terms of, making sure, and I didn't want to comment, and I want to give us to give the president the benefit of doubt. If you look at the investment, even the budget that we made of 3.6 trillion, look holistically, leave politics aside, and we must start from a certain point of view, because we cannot be talking about creating employment and we are not being deliberate in terms of where are we putting the resources to create this employment.
Okay.
When you talk about the education and investing on the future of our children, are we really investing towards that direction as a country? So if you look at the budget that we passed the other day of 3.6 trillion, you'll be able to see the government plan in the whole budget, and where we have actually put a lot of resources in terms of manufacturing, in terms of production. Justina is talking about we are concentrating on the bottom up and the hustlers. Those are the people who have been forgotten for a very long time. And we are trying to do as much as we can to bring up them up to the middle class level, so that at least we can work together as a country, rather than going with the, the gap between the rich and the poor. It is widening up each and every day. So as a government, we must be deliberate to make sure that we lift the hustlers from where they are. We bring resources, in terms of resources, to invest in those people, because that's where the largest number of the pyramid is. So if we are able to empower as many as we can, we are also able to increase, in terms of taxation. And even something that the president says, that we may not have a problem with, Kenyans, they don't have a problem with paying tax, but they will have a problem with misappropriation of that tax.
Okay.
Because if you go across the board and you listen to people what they're saying we're going to pay this tax. But in case of any misappropriation, probably you guys will have a problem.
In a week's time, we'll be marking exactly 1 year since we went to the polls. And that means it's a year since the elections last year. Well, the cabinet has not been in place for that long. It's been roughly 8 towards 9 months now. But we saw hints and instances of misbehavior or overreaching their mandate and authority as early as a month into their appointment. Issues about one cabinet secretary talking about issues in a different ministry, and there was a confusion between the Trade and Investment Ministry and the Agriculture Ministry on importation of maize. That happened last year, immediately after the appointment to the cabinet. We've seen tweets, some which could be deemed reckless, even to do with foreign relations from cabinet secretaries, bombing, calling for the bombing of foreign countries. And we are yet to see any of them being called to order. We've seen now the issue with the police and comments that are made implying that the police probably, the police service is not as independent as it should be. Now, these are serious issues, away from even showing up late for signing performance contracts. Some of these issues, yes, do deserve disciplinary measures. Don't you think it is time for that cabinet reshuffle?
It is definitely time for, it's long overdue, actually. And I think you don't wait until someone messes up so many times for you to discipline them. I think the president needs to take charge and to step up. Because what is happening is also, yes, a problem of character in terms of the team members, but it's also a problem of leadership. Because the president and the deputy president are eventually the leaders of that team. And if the team is not coherent, if the team turns into a Tower of Babel, yes, we blame the characters, but we also blame the leadership. So the president needs to take charge and ensure that his team members are actually towing the line and are aligned to the agenda of the day. And so as the president blames his team members, he must also look at himself and ask himself, this is a reflection of me, because remember, and I think we had this discussion and we said the president had many models. Just when the cabinet was appointed, he had many models of either appointing professionals into his team, people with merit, of either, there were many models he would have chosen, but he picked this model of rewarding loyalty. So if he was rewarding loyalty, then there are repercussions to that. Okay. If you're rewarding loyalty, then you must also expect that, and it is a good thing to give people a chance with this model, that anyone has an equal chance of getting into that team. But there are also repercussions, that these people might not be competent enough, they might not be up to the level that is required to implement this agenda. And so I'm sure he was aware of that from the very beginning, because some of the members, team members, even just from the word go, you will tell, this guy, he doesn't have the qualifications to match this.
Do you think the president is preparing us for that eventuality, that yes, he knew that some of these appointments were necessary to actually, politically were necessary at the time, but he knew that I know after a while you will start messing up, and then will come the need to reshuffle, and I'll just say, hey, I gave you the opportunity, you did not perform, what can I do?
But you see, if he doesn't do that, it should have been done at the very beginning. It's getting late in the day. You see, 1 year, we said 100 days. It's now 1 year, and 1 year now people start asking, what have you been able to achieve? And remember, next year is more or less the last grace period year for the current regime. The other year we're getting into campaign mode. No one wants to hear of a new team on board, which professional you brought on board. We are now campaigning for 2020. We'll be campaigning for 2027, so we don't want to hear about anything that didn't go right. So he really needs to move with speed and ensure that he has the right team. And he can't, like I said, you can't be blaming the team members, yet you're the leader of that team. You should also provide the leadership that is required, because you constituted that team. The Constitution provides the president with the powers to constitute the team.
The buck stops with the president.
The buck stops with him.
There's something that happens with power once you get into a position of power. And if at all you were successful in the last elections, you would have been in that position. So many cabinet secretaries get to enjoy the kind of power that comes with being a cabinet secretary is immense.
Yes.
Having outright, not necessarily outriders, but having a flag on the car, chase cars and stuff like that. And we've seen even the kind of excesses that even the president was pointing out, away from being late. Earlier in the week, he talked about the issue of foreign travels and the fact that he was cutting that down to about 45 days in a year max. That means that some people are actually spending a lot of their time outside the country. And even the kind of entourage that the cabinet secretaries carry with them around on such foreign travel. Do you think it's an issue of, because government excesses is a big issue, but don't you think that even at a personal level, power does corrupt?
I think power makes you compensate for things you lacked in life. Many of them say that, oh, people used to look down at us because we were poor. Now I'm here, I can do what I want. And I want to make it clear to the cabinet and even the president, they no longer relate to the current population in this country. 67% of this country are unemployed. When you look at the president and the deputy, the president said he worked for Moi. So after university, he worked for Moi. When you look at the cabinet, all of them, they are saying, after campus, I worked here. But the reality on the ground is that after you graduate, you stay at home, you don't have a job. So they first need to realize that they no longer relate to anyone on the ground. And that is why they need to really perform. And if you really relate to the person on the ground, you know the pain of there's a parent who paid university for you, and that is pushing us further, even as parents, to poverty, because if you're still taking care of your 30-year-old, they have not moved out, you're not relating to even this parent who is struggling, then you need to really put yourself into the shoes, have the reality on the ground. Something else I think that is covering or is tying the president's hands is campaign financials. These campaigns are very costly. And I blame the Wanjikos on the ground because they're the ones who want the grandiose, they want you to be seen on the ground. Being seen on the ground is what? Is costly, is a mobilization affair. So even the financiers want their own people in your cabinet so that they can get their return on investment. How about Wanjiko shunning free things in campaigns, saying, I don't want your money, just want to hear after you win this seat, how are you going to deliver? And that is why I'm challenging Kenyans, and particularly the voter. In Nairobi, one time they said, Sonko ataweza kutoa Kidero. We forgot about after amemtoa, what is the delivery implication? So I even want Wanjiko to take the blame on this. Look at someone who has an idea. Look at someone who is not going to tell you that we thank God, zile meno za Azimio would have crushed us, but God, okay, God got you there, but he's given you the brains. No, deliver to the people of Kenya. But I'm happy again, we are moving away from now, the election is done, remove your campaign clothes, get into delivery.
Yes, and the buck stops with the president. I know you want to respond to what Raphael said.
The buck stops with the president. And I think, politically we must give the president the benefit of doubt, because we're coming from the political, arena, probably, whereby there are so many people who sacrificed for him. You cannot go back again and become the president and you forget from where you're coming from and your troops and your wounded soldiers. So he had in one way or the other to compensate the political class. But we have been telling them now, the president, you have paid your political debt. You have given everybody an opportunity to serve, And I think the deputy president was very categorical yesterday, saying, when the president appoints you to this job, just realize and know that the friendship is over. Now he's your boss. And now being your, there are so many people who were with him in Karen when he was the deputy president. We used to sit there, take coffee, kula mandazi, we joke with the president. He's no longer the same person because now he has a duty and a responsibility to perform. He has a contract with the people of Kenya. In case he messes up this, contract that he has with the Kenyan people, he's the first person who is going to be suffering at the end of the day. So he told them, the deputy president said, the friendship line now has been drawn in Asia. Now you have a boss. You no longer have the same friend that you used to have. If you've been treating this appointment because, I mean, the president is my friend, and then he can't fire them. He can't fire me, or he can't fire the cabinet secretaries. Now that time is over. So that now it is time to perform and deliver on whatever you have been given or taxed by the Kenyan people. So this backstops with him, and I think that's why he also appointed them, and he had to show them that, you know what, he has been he have been having very loyal soldiers. And he said, the only thing that I can do is to reward you. You prove, and you give me the benefit of doubt to whether you're going to perform or not. Now that time is gone. So the next thing that you'll also see that the honeymoon is also coming to an end.
Okay.
The face that the president, you know, the card that he removed yesterday is to show you that the honeymoon is over. The issues to do with Azimio is over. The issue to do with politics is over. If you are a cabinet secretary, you have a duty to perform. What we are expecting from you is A, B, C, D. If you don't do that, and we are supporting the president, and we have been telling him, if these cabinet secretaries are not going to perform, because we have a lot of responsibility, even political responsibility back at home, even some of us, because when you go to look for roads, the cabinet does not understand what you're asking for, or even where the money is coming from. We have that challenge as well, but we want to give them the benefit of doubt, but we are telling the president, you have paid your debt politically, you have rewarded your soldiers as much as you can, you have done anything humanly possible, you know, to reward your people. Now, it is the time now to remove the sword and work. And the deputy president communicated yesterday to the cabinet secretaries. And he told them, if you continue treating the president as your friend, then you're losing it. That's why you're even coming to the meeting very late.
Wow.
And there is no single day, and I can tell you, Idimuri, we have ever gone for political meeting or any meeting in State House, and the president came late. If he says the meeting is 8, at exactly 8:01, you'll be seated there.
Okay.
Some of us, sometimes you feel ashamed because by the time you are getting in, you thought that the president would maybe come around 8:30. You find him seated there. So, I mean, he has shown through, you know, how he has been performing and how he has been doing his duties as the president. Even on the political meetings, go to the gatherings that he has been going around. If the meeting is going to start at 11, look at the Easy Diary. If the meeting says that the president will be seated at 11, he'll be seated there. So the cabinet secretary is behaving and coming late to the, you know, signing of the contracts, or probably, you know, giving roadside declaration without even knowing exactly what is the end of their mandate. But sometimes I sympathize with Nakumisha, because I mean that's why she made an outside declaration, but it was coming from an emotional point of view that one of her bodyguard was killed. Actually, it was the barrier of her bodyguard who was killed during Maandamano, who went in Kitare to try and, you know, calm the people, then she was killed. So, but the community said we could have protected his death. Was it not from the OCS who was on the side of the people who were killing the bodyguard? So, I mean, she was confronted in a political, you know, people wanted you to make a decision as a reader, as a CS. Maybe there was a way she was supposed to have, you know, taken that route and maybe say, I'll talk to the Kindiki, I'll talk to IG, and maybe probably have heard your concern and we are going, you know, but maybe she was so emotional, you know, we give her the benefit of that.
Okay.
Because sometimes even as politicians in Dimuri, we transfer those people, you know, at any given time. I'll go to my meeting there, it is so political.
You cannot fire a police officer.
And then I say, you OCS, you must leave this place. And I have no capacity to do that. Even as a member of parliament.
Okay.
But sometimes we give her the benefit of doubt. The honeymoon is over, but I think now we will see a different, you know, cabinet. But we are calling for the president, and we really appreciate what the president is saying. But the honeymoon is over. The cabinet secretary should understand that.
In a short while, we'll be getting feedback from my colleague Limuki on our question this morning. But before that, the UD administration, William Ruto's administration, has had made promises, and enough promises. In fact, one of the biggest talking points has been the number of promises that were made and how many have been delivered. For delivery of these promises, the cabinet is crucial. For having a failing cabinet, or a cabinet that appears to be misbehaving or overreaching its mandate, definitely will have consequences on the promises made by the president.
I mean, definitely. I mean, you are as good as your team, you know, and so, I mean, of course, there are many promises that were made. There are many promises that are still being made on top of the promises that were that were made. In fact, people have been joking that this is a government of promises, you know. They keep you hoping. But for you, I mean, some of the promises and the aspirations and targets that they had are quite important in terms of, I mean, for us as a country to move forward. But the team that they put in place, you realize that team to some extent does not match the ambition that they have. And that's why I think the president needs to move fast, not tomorrow, not even today, yesterday, to constitute a team that can help him deliver that. Again, I'm saying he made his bed and he has to lie on it. He had many, other alternatives in terms of models of constituting a team, but he chose this model of rewarding loyalty. And if he rewarded loyalty, I think he shouldn't, you cannot plant guavas and then expect to reap tomatoes.
And interestingly,
You can't say that.
No, it's true.
Positions in cabinet, you don't apply for the job.
Exactly.
No,
These
For the
are
director
people,
appointment.
and
Yeah,
even
the
amongst the
director
loyal,
appointment.
even amongst the people who are loyal, he still had options within that basket. So these are the people he chose. And so you cannot have a team of 11, you have one best player and the other ones are not as good. Then you say, no, they come from my area, so that's why I gave them a chance. Even if we lose, so you need to be ready for those consequences. So the president needs to know that since he's the one who constituted this team based on a particular model that he chose himself, he also needs to take blame, because the buck stops with him. And like I'm saying, time is not running out, time ran out. Remember, we had 100 days and we said, will this team really deliver? It's now 1 year down the line. The president himself is coming out and saying, look, I have a terrible team, a team that perhaps does not meet the standards of integrity, professionalism, and accountability. No, but what he was saying is what he was saying in essence is that, look, I have a team that is not delivering. I know more than this team, as expected.
Yes.
That is, so if you break it down, you're basically saying, this team, these guys
Double Kawanjiko, I'll give you 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds.
With all fairness, the president did not say that he has a terrible team. He has a good team, because the moment he formed that team, he had a lot of faith in them. But what the president has done, it's not that he said that you cabinet secretaries, you know what, you are failing me. He didn't say that. But he just told them, a few, probably who are not able to meet the standard in terms of him even waking up and making sure that they arrive on time. He was telling them, you know what, this friendship and honeymoon thing is done. Some of the promises that the president has made, and maybe probably we have another conversation sometimes back in terms of the promises that he made to the Kenyan people. So far, and give him credit where to the president, because so far he has been able to achieve quite a number of things. It's only that he continued talking about it and continue making more promises, which is okay, because he has the capacity and the machinery to make sure that those promises are honored. But there may be a few implications here and there, some of things that he promised, probably because of the law, probably because even of his way of thinking that we should put the independence of every arm of government, independent. And so there is that interference that probably he has not overseen, some of those issues. But in terms of making sure that he has a team that will deliver and perform, I think he does, because the buck stops with him. So it was him.
One of the most popular phrases has been next week.
Now, October, are we getting the digital ID? Because he said in 90 days.
Look at the promises that he made,
So
even the gas, some of the promises
I'm
he has
not making
delivered.
a promise. Next week we'll be marking 1 year
Yeah.
since election day.
But there's something
August
also
9th.
before you go.
Briefly.
He said that, remember, before he got into the position, they used to argue that tulileta cabinet secretaries who are professionals, but they didn't help us look for votes. Remember, that serikali hawakutafuta, but they're pretending they're bigger than the people who looked for votes. Probably that is what influenced his model, which is terribly failing. He needs technocrats, or he needs a politician who will remove the political jersey and wear the delivery jersey.
Okay. Well, interesting. 1 year after the election, these are the conversations we're having today. Is the cabinet up to task? The president himself, the appointing authority, called them out yesterday on some of the failings they've had since they were appointed sometime late last year. Whether or not this is an indication of a looming cabinet reshuffle, we should just have to wait and see. Now, we're just about to get some feedback from my colleague Lemuki, and after that we'll come back and discuss the issue that is not featuring on the dailies this morning, but was the biggest talking point last week. That has to do with the mediation talks, the dialogue that we're talking about, and whether or not it is a remedy for all the problems that this country faces. For now, over to you, Lemuki.
Well, let's sample in some feedback from Facebook. And of course, our question of the day is, do you support the recommended reforms in the education sector? Of course, many would have expected that conversation on the CSs, but I think the elephant in the room today is matters education. which is making headlines basically in all the papers. And I see Michael Oma says, how do I support something that I even don't understand? I have been going through the report since yesterday, but up to now, the only thing I'm able to capture is the word junior secondary school. And quite interesting. And let me see, someone else here says, Willis Gishohi, confusion and confusion make total confusion. They could have included MKU Director Simon Gisharu, Eliv Mugenda, Belio Kipsang. The rest were just in a money-making venture. And Caroline Nalieka says, let them employ teachers on permanent basis, not internship. Just one more comment from Facebook. Of course, there are Kenyans who are worried that even if they have their opinions concerning that, it might not be factored in since these recommendations have already been made. But let me sample some feedback from X, previously Twitter. Paul Loiter says, we have no option, Flora. The train already left the station. And by the way, you guys struggle with Kiswahili. My colleagues. This is also concerning Fred and Stanley. When reading Habari Leo in the morning, I think the Tanzanian papers are, we're still learning, guys. And then intelligence is awareness. Here says, all I saw were superficial changes. They lost an opportunity to make a major beneficial overhaul over the system. And finally, Elliot Karaoke says, let's evaluate how far we've gone with the previous reforms before bringing new ones. That is just some feedback from Kenyans concerning the reforms in the education sector. And of course, the question of the day remains, do you support the recommended reforms in the education sector? At TV47 News on Twitter, TV47 Kenya on Facebook. The hashtag is Morning Cafe. Keep your feedback coming in. Fred?
Thank you so much, Lemuki, for giving us the feedback this morning. I'm still in studio with the Honorable John Kawanjiko, MP Kiambaa constituency, Raphael Obonyo, public policy analyst, and Justina Wamai, a former presidential running mate in the 2022 election. I want us to move on to issues that have been making headlines for the past several weeks now, coming from the Maandamano, and now we see a decision or a thawing of relations, and we now expect dialogue to take place between Kenya Kwanza and the Azimio coalition. Although Kenya Kwanza is yet to name its team of 5, I think they've only identified the leader of majority and in both the National Assembly and the Senate. The non-parliamentary members are yet to be identified. Now, the issue that has arisen has been on the agenda of these talks. The fact that the cost of living is not going to feature mostly, and there seems to be agreement that probably even such talks are not the best channel to address the issue of cost of living. So fine, we won't bother, we won't waste too much time discussing about the cost of living. Let's talk about the other issues that both sides have listed. At least from the Azimio side, in their statement yesterday, it talked about bipartisan reconstitution of the IEBC, audit of elections, inclusivity, national affairs, and respect for political parties. From the statement sent out by the leader of majority in the National Assembly at the weekend, the list of issues to be discussed: reconstitution of the IEBC, implementation of the 2/3 gender rule, entrenchment of CDF, establishment and entrenchment of the office of the official leader of opposition, and the embedment of the office of Prime Cabinet Secretary. Now, if you look at some of this, some of them were actually contained in the BBI in one way or the other. And some of them are contained in that memorandum to Parliament in December by the President to the speakers of both houses of Parliament. And most of this would actually require a change in our laws. Do you think it's an opportune time to have that conversation? Because yes, also this month, we're marking the 13th year since the promulgation of the Constitution, 10 years of devolution. Is it time to actually carry out an amendment or two to the Constitution, Justina?
Before I answer that, let me give a quick feedback from the feedback we got. What Kenyans feel is that there's lack of communication probably the president needs to understand that there's the ability, the capacity and willingness of his people. Another thing is Kenyans expecting that if it goes to the National Assembly, will the MPs have the autonomy to make a decision about it?
This remember about the education.
Yes, for the feedback they were talking. Remember the finance bill. When Mushomba talked, then she was told that it was not the party position. So I'm hoping that even if the president wants the cabinet to perform, he also needs to give autonomy to the National Assembly. Okay. Now back to the issue of changing our laws. I think everything we do in life is trial and error. So it has served us for 13 years. There are emerging problems. The office of a leader of opposition is something that we need as of now. Remember in the US, we have Al Gore, McCain. When they lose an election, they go back to doing what they usually do. But in Kenya, our economy is so bad, and I dare say that these people are fighting just to have their bills be paid by the government. That is a fact. Mm-hmm. They have refused to understand that once you lose an election, you go back. But where are you going back to? Many of them in Azimio tell us we are lawyers. But the Kenyan right now cannot even afford food. How are they going to retain a lawyer? So it is incumbent on anyone in power, even those in Azimio, because they have numbers in National Assembly, to influence policies well in terms of economy, in terms of taxes and all that, so that even investors can invest here, so that the economy can grow. If you're a lawyer, you can push papers for many companies. If you're a teacher and all those things, at least private schools will come up. So it is incumbent on them to grow the economy. Let them remember that they want their bills to be paid by the taxpayers' money. What about us who pay our own bills? We survive. We want a conducive environment that is peaceful for us to thrive. Additionally, let me say that I have always argued that Baba should be given money the way he was given in 2018, so that we move on. But it is very unfortunate that we do not want to accept. Look at Shimon Peres tells us that sometimes if you have a problem, it doesn't need a solution. It just needs you to understand it's a fact you cope with. The fact is someone won the election and they were given the power. Uhuru had said that sitapatia mwizi, but he's privy to undiluted intelligence. So he knew who won the election and how Kenyans voted. Why are they not even listening to Uhuru, who gave the power back democratically and constitutionally to William Ruto? And that brings me to the point Ali said on TV47, that Uhuru Kenyatta and Martha are not unnecessary baggage. And I'm happy they've been told that. Can they move away from campaigns and let the government of the day work? So I think it's about time we change laws, particularly on the office of leader of opposition.
Okay. It would appear that in this whole push for dialogue, that Kenya Kwanza was being forced into it, that they were reluctant to have this dialogue. But from the agenda here, I think it is an opportune time, don't you agree it is an opportune time for even the president to canvass these issues that he wants to happen, especially for any possible change in the laws? Yes, he's written to the National Assembly and the Senate, the speakers of the two houses. But canvassing this in a bipartisan approach, bipartisan way, his proposal for change in the Constitution, this is an opportune time even for the president. So this dialogue will actually be more beneficial to the president.
Maybe before I answer that, I also want to do a rejoinder on what Justina has said in terms of those people who have responded there. It is very important, and we appreciate the president that you give people an opportunity. Some of us, we are here because we are given an opportunity. So when you give someone an opportunity and he feels it's no longer upon you, it's upon the person who has been given that opportunity to prove him or herself that I can deliver. That said and done also, in terms of whatever the government has been able to do, even in terms of making sure that the teachers, have been employed and on permanent basis. This is the only government within the first 1 year we have been able to employ more than 50,000 teachers on permanent basis, not even in terms of internship, making sure that also we're investing towards the correct or towards the right direction. Let me come to what you have asked. I think it is also a conversation that the president, has been thinking about, because when he made a memorandum to the National Assembly last year, actually some of the issues that he was also saying, we don't have to take the country through referendum to make sure that we pass this type of laws. Those are some of the issues that can be addressed by both the National Assembly and the Senate. And he said some of the issues that he also felt like, when, our constitution is based on the winner takes it all. But he was also trying to bring in and making sure that the opposition do their job. Mm-hmm. Because some of these issues that we have been able to address within the 9 months, even the finance bill, it's not that, there is a person who asked me the other day, is it the first finance bill? Because it has been there. Every budget has a finance bill. But this particular one, because the opposition are doing their job, It was so much highlighted, and also people were able to educate themselves in terms of what the government is doing. And that's what the president has been insisting. Opposition, do your work. Put us into check. Let us know whether we are doing the right thing. If there is some issue that is not okay, let us also try to empower the office of the official opposition so that they do their job of checking the government and the day-to-day running of the government. So if we keep the opposition, that means that the government, we are going to go into another hole that we were, during the 2018 up to 2022 election. Some of the messes that the president is trying to undo, there were those messes that were done between during the handshake brothers. Before, the Raila Odinga used to do his part very well. We used to know quite a number of issues that are happening within the government. So the president is saying, this independence of the office of the opposition, let us make sure that it is empowered. Let us create, that office, through parliament, make sure that they are fully funded in terms of what they're supposed to be doing, so that they keep checking the government and the day-to-day running of the government. Number two, I appreciate what Justin has said. I mean, all along we know that what the Azimio character have been looking up to is money. And we are telling them there must be a way to deal with the election. We cannot be going to a campaign for a whole year. Then after the election is done, we go back again to politics and now start calling up. We need to have a handshake. We need to know how the government, we need to get into the government. The moment there are people who have lost the election and their life, and they move on with their life. There are people I was competing with as a member of parliament. They don't bother me that we need to have a handshake. They agreed, Kawanjiko won the election, life must move on. They go back again to their businesses. Why is it only one person who does not agree, or two or three characters who do not agree that once you lose an election, you go back again to your business and you continue doing? When you engage yourself and invest in an election and politics, you must be aware, you must have another sense. Even Justina here, she was a deputy president, she could be the deputy president now. But the moment she lost the election, she went back again to her, whatever was putting food on the table. She's just
I went to the government.
You want the whole cake.
She's not looking for a handshake. So we must tell ourselves the truth. When you engage yourself in an election, you must have an element or a space whereby what happens if I lose this election. Okay. Depending even on the kind of investment that you put, you must put an investment that you're willing to lose. But you cannot put an investment whereby it's a must for you to win. What happens if you don't win? And I want to encourage and say, from where I come from, the people on the ground, when you listen to the ground, the people are saying, if there is one thing that can make the president unpopular, it's not even the finance bill. It's not even the taxation. It is about this dialogue and the handshake. Okay,
there seems to be a belief that any dialogue will definitely just result in a handshake, but not necessarily. There are other issues, and they've actually highlighted them, and that actually this dialogue could actually be beneficial even for the president, that he has some proposals he has placed on the table, and he needs to canvass them, at least on the political front as well. Issues to do with the changes in the constitution. It is also incumbent upon this panel to be truthful to our viewers and tell them that the issue of cost of living may not necessarily be
on the table.
on the table. And rightly so, that those people on the table may not be the best to address that issue. Don't you think that the dialogue either way is crucial, given the other issues that are before the teams?
Yeah, thanks, Fred. Democracy is work in progress world over, and so every country needs to make sure that democracy works for them and keep strengthening their democracy. And Kenya is one of those. We need to find ways of making sure that this democracy works for us. And elections, for example, is one way. It's a democratic process, but we've also realized over the years, and that's why we thought of change of constitution. Now we are thinking of reviewing this constitution, because the model of governance that we adopted seems not to work for us the best way we think it should. For example, winner takes it all. We've realized that it's risky and it's dangerous. So we need that conversation on how do we make sure that we don't have acrimonious elections. How do we make sure that this thing works for us? And to your question on dialogue, I think dialogue is a good thing, but because it can help us address some of these crucial issues, like, for example, reconstitution of IBC. It's something that cannot be left to just one arm or one formation. It requires sort of the entire population, especially in terms of political players, it is important. So an issue like that requires sort of bipartisan engagement. Something like some of the issues that the president outlined in his memorandum, which was sent way back many months later, it hasn't been implemented, requires sort of bipartisan kind of engagement. So that's a good thing. But the problem should be that we shouldn't use dialogue also to just reward and address political concerns. We should also use dialogue to address issues that affect the ordinary mwananchi. And some of the issues, election is important, you know, 2/3 gender rule is extremely important, but one of the key issues now affecting people across the board is that we need to address this thing of cost of living. So while all these other issues are important, can it also be a platform for them to gel together and address this one very important issue, which is high cost of living, because it's an opportunity. Of course, the other issues are more or less an entry point, but it should be an entry point to help them work together. But having said that, and I know Kawanjiko might disagree with me, the president has been saying no, he needs to be held accountable, which is very, very important, but by the opposition. But you realize also that the ruling party, which is Kenya Kwanza, has also been raiding the opposition. So you want the opposition to be strong and to hold you accountable. At the same time, you are raiding and taking away their members, you know, and we've seen many times whenever there was almost a maandamano, there are these, now they're called 9 Musketeers, who the president will invite to State House to take a picture with them and say, we are working together. So you would wonder, okay, how are you saying you want to strengthen?
Thank you, Raphael, for introducing that thing, because that issue, the kind of behavior of the National Assembly, and we have a member of the National Assembly here, the legislature, there have been claims that the legislature is now under the capture of the executive. We've seen claims that, or questions on the independence of Parliament. You mentioned it a bit earlier on, that yes, we have brilliant young members of the National Assembly. Honorable Kawanjiko is an example. Yet they are not allowed to think independently from what the executive or their individual parties have decided. The dialogue right now is an indictment on the National Assembly, on the conduct of the National Assembly. When they were given the opportunity to have bipartisan talks, that failed. Now we're looking for people outside Parliament to actually reinforce any such dialogue, that people from the National Assembly or the Senate are not enough to have. Definitely, the legislature is failing us as a country.
And I blame the citizens, because when you listen to many young MPs, they say, I didn't have campaign money, but Ruto funded my campaign. There is nothing free in this world. He funded your campaign, you got there, do his dirty work. That is your role there. So you don't even expect them to think independently. And where were they funded? Because Wanjiko is asking for money on the ground. So it is incumbent on Wanjiko, if you want your MP to be independent, if you want them to speak truth to power, do not force them to look for money from someone who is going to say it's payback time. That is what I want to challenge the common mwananchi. Another thing, Ruto had said that there is no handshake. I want to remind him that maisha imemramba, because in 2007, he was forcing Raila to really get a handshake with Kibaki. Now it's about time to give back. The same thing he wanted Kibaki to do, sasa peane. Additionally, I want to remind the government and maybe opposition that we've been given 80 billion money on digital. It was a conversation yesterday on the digital economy. And of course, government had promised to give us hotspots. Okay, that is okay. But if you're going to focus on the election of this country, because they're asking for the audit, we need to be innovative. How? We always go to a supermarket, you take a cup, you read the screen, the e-post tells you how much the cup is, and they add. How about then putting that money into the election process, having a barcode on the ballot box, so that if you vote for Justina for president and the code is 001, my votes will be added. If it's Kawanjiko and the competitor for MP, the code is there, you add. The only purpose of us voting physically is for verifiability. But at least at Bomas, it is reflecting that the votes are adding up. So that we avoid this issue, Mara agents were paid, Mara votes were stolen, Mara ballot stuffing. I think we also need to move with times. Let's not focus on the 20th century things. let us go with time. So if it's digital, let us even see the difference in the electoral system so that people stop saying my votes were stolen.
Okay, and thank you for that brilliant suggestion to the reforms to the electoral system.
Unpaid advice.
Yes, I hope somebody is listening.
Part of the people who've been the dialogue or the bipartisan approach.
Back to this question about the independence of Parliament, and this is and I'm sure you've heard this, that even the parliamentary group meetings are held at State House nowadays. And this did not start with this administration. Yes, even the Jubilee administration was holding parliamentary group meetings at State House.
We don't need to differentiate between, you know, as a president, what are you supposed to do for you to learn the government? One of the key factors that you must have is majority in the National Assembly. So at any given time, and this is politics, we put politics aside and governance issue aside, because when it comes to political issues, you must also be able to learn the country politically, because the moment you don't have the majority in the National Assembly, it means every item that the government has will not see the right of the day at the end of the day. So for you able to learn the government, you must have the majority. Number two, we are Kenya Kwanza government, and our party leader is William Samoei Ruto. We have seen it during Uhuru Kenyatta. They used to go for pidgin in State House. There are issues that probably will take party positions in terms of, you know, what the government wanted to achieve, and that's why all of us went for a certain political party. We didn't go independent. If, for example, I didn't want to align myself with Kenya Kwanza agenda, I'll definitely maybe have gone to independent or maybe probably another party. And that's why you've seen there is that difference. Even when it comes to the floor of the House, there is the opposition side, the ODM. Whether the idea is too good, and they didn't know. And we saw it with Pasari the other day on the finance bill. She was like, you know what, I can't stomach this. My people who vote for me, they need these houses. And I can be able to tell, you know, at the end of the day, there must be that difference.
But
she was able to go aside.
The issues, yes, I agree with you. There's the issue of whipping party votes within the National Assembly. But there's also clear bad manners in the National Assembly. The fact that the minority whip is a self-confessed sympathizer of the majority and attends the parliamentary group meetings of the majority side at State House. Don't you? Surely that there are questions to be raised about such issues.
It is the work of the opposition to disorganize the government. It is the work of the government to disorganize the opposition. That is the politics at the end of it. And you know, you must separate the two. You must separate the governance and politics, because at the end of the day, you cannot run this country like you know, like it's a private organization. Politics is involved at the end of the day. So what the government or what Kenya Kwanza did, and if, for example, my friend here, Bonyo, has talked about the democracy. If, for example, I want my people to be, there are issues that I need to be addressed as far as my constituency is concerned, you go where your bread is buttered in terms of making sure that you bring those development, you know, to your people, because at the end of the day, and because of that, let me just finish and say, sometimes democracy is, maybe we are not there where Justine was talking about the America people. That probably when you lose an election, you go back to where you belong. There are people, there are businesses, their day-to-day, what brings food on their table is politics. And if today I feel like I want to go and work with ODM, probably, and I know it's you know, I'm committing a suicide, you know, kind of a decision, and I know 2027 is coming, but I want to make sure this one time I want to deliver, I'll join the government so that at least I can make sure there is water, there is roads, and you cannot, those people will not go to the president, let the president say, okay, fine, you know, because you know DM, please don't come to my...
Let's give Raphael an opportunity to talk about this independence of the National Assembly.
I think it is very, very important for us to strengthen our institutions and allow them to mature, grow, and to serve their purpose. If you look at Parliament the way it is now, I think it's at one point, I remember when they were proposing this act, this bill on state cooperation, they said Parliament is unnecessary bureaucracy that delays the process. You know, if you dismiss Parliament in that way, it means that it has no role. And truly looking at what Parliament has done, it has become almost a house that only rubber stamps what comes from the executive. We saw it with the vetting. Some of these issues that are being raised now about the cabinet, I mean, were raised at the vetting, at the point of vetting, but Parliament passed all these names 100% without raising any concern. Why? Because they're implementing agenda of the government. I think it's also important. Implementing agenda of the government should not be at all costs. We should not just be talking about development at all costs.
And there should be oversight.
There should be oversight. And I think our development will be more sustainable if there is oversight. Without checks and balances, without allowing other institutions to play their role, this development will only be for a short term. In the long run, it will all collapse.
Okay, my dear panelists, we've come to the end of our session today, but I'll give you each 20 seconds. 20 seconds to give your final word. 20 seconds, please, and let's stick to that. Let's start with you, Justina.
Okay, on the issue of homecoming, I want to tell the government that they are telling us there's no money, so they need to focus on priority spending. Finally, the government should not kill the middle class. How are they killing it? High cost of power, kickbacks when an investor wants to come. This middle class is the one we'll call Mama Mboga, ni katie kama kawaida. 20 of them is 20 times. A boda guy will carry more people who are going to work. So tafadhali, don't kill the middle class. Let the middle class grow so that we can have money and the economy can grow better.
Thank you, Justina Omai.
Yeah, it is also good to separate issues and say that it doesn't mean that when you're supporting the government, you're not doing your oversight job. Probably the agendas that the government has brought on the table, you have no business or you don't feel any urge to oppose. But we have seen the three arms of government, separate the executive, the judiciary. The president has really been respecting those three arms of government. But also politically, we have a duty and responsibility to support the government, because at the end of the day, there is no way we are going to implement the manifesto without the support of the National Assembly. Okay. So there is a clear separation of power. When there are issues to make sure that we oppose whatever the government is doing, we normally do it. We even have a caucus even before the agenda comes in the floor of the House. Okay. We are able to manage our house in order.
Raphael, finally, your 20 seconds.
I think members of parliament, Kawajiko is here, I think they should relay that. I think members of parliament should, criticize, challenge, and compliment government where necessary. They shouldn't just compliment and be members of praise and worship of the government. Okay. It's extremely important that they give Kenyans the governance that they deserve by being the true representatives of the people. It doesn't mean that if you raise a concern and voice your concern that you don't like the government. It just means that you want better. Okay. You want to see government perform better, and we should see more of that. Thank
you so much, Raphael Obonyo, public policy analyst. Justina Omai, former presidential running mate in the 2022 elections, and Honorable John Kawanjiko, MP, Kiambaa constituency, our panelists this morning. And before we let them out of the studio, it's an opportunity for me to read the editorial comment this morning. So, education serves as a bedrock of any nation's development, and it is imperative that Kenya's education sector actually focuses and the system remains strong, relevant, and adaptable to the changing needs of society. Now, in recent times, there have been significant efforts made by the government to reform the education sector, particularly with the introduction of a new curriculum. However, the lack of clarity and communication surrounding these reforms has caused confusion among learners, parents, and schools. To safeguard the future of our nation and ensure the success of these reforms, urgent actions needed to implement the recommendations put forward by the Presidential Working Party on Education Reforms. One of the key challenges facing Kenya's education system is the ambiguity surrounding the implementation of the new curriculum. Such confusion can lead to setbacks in students' learning journeys, negatively impacting their academic performance and overall development. It is essential that the government provides well-defined directives and consistent updates on the curriculum's implementation to foster a conducive learning environment. Moreover, the recent changes to the funding model for universities, set to take effect immediately, demand effective communication and transparency. Abrupt implementation without proper public engagement can create anxiety among students and educators alike, potentially leading to disruption in the learning process. Now, to build public trust, government officials and departments must actively engage with all relevant stakeholders, ensuring that their concerns and suggestions are taken into account. The need for clarity and effective communication extends beyond just these two reforms. It applies to any major changes to the education policy. Transparency in decision-making is crucial for fostering public confidence in the education system. When the government proactively communicates its plans, rationale, and expected outcomes, it demonstrates a commitment to transparency and accountability. Furthermore, boosting public confidence in the quality and tenacity of Kenya's education system requires